So when you forget, you can come back to it. So we are building a hockey arena. I said for some, if they wanted to make it basketball, they could. But we're not doing a lacrosse or football stadium. Only because it's an open stadium. It has far more rows, far more seats. It's a different building in a sense. Not that you couldn't build a football stadium or lacrosse stadium, but we're focused on the arena part. And when I saw you last class, we did a quick overview of what I expected. So we're going to review that, and then I want to make sure you know what to expect in terms of what you're handing in. So Mr. Doggs has asked your company to design a new seating plan. And there's two parts to the seating plan. I know. It's trying to speak to you through the thing. Do you hear what the message coming through? It's coming through. All right, I get it. I'm pretty sure my bulb's going to go whenever it goes. So, sad day when it happens. But focus on me. And if I make my video, then you can still watch the video with your phone, and that won't happen. All right, so let me be focused, okay? So, we're building a new arena, and there are two parts to it. One part is designing how many seats make up the arena, and then the second part has to do with financing, what to charge per seat in terms of what you're doing. So I'm going to remind you what we did on Thursday, and then focus what we still need to do today. So we need to answer these 5 questions to begin with. And the 5 questions that need to be answered in the proposal: how many seats are in the first row? How many rows go up to the top? The number of seats by which each row increases, the number of seats in the last row, and the total number of seats in the whole arena. And we actually talked quite a bit about that. We're also going to talk about the next 3 bullet points, which are, can you determine a reasonable price per game for each seat in the first row? We're going to skip down the bottom one. Can you determine the price per game for each seat in the last row? And then, can you determine a factor that could be used? And a factor would be the same as a common ratio, where as you go up each row, it's going to go less in price, but you'd be multiplying times the same number each time to get the next row, the next row, the next row, and the next row. Okay? So, you're going to have at least 3 pieces of paper for your project. 1 piece of paper, you can say you've already started. And it's okay if this is more than 1 piece of paper. 1 piece of paper is your scratch. That's what you use to experiment on, to try something on, to draw something on, to whatever it is. And it's not organized. It's just simply your scratch that goes everywhere on that piece of paper as you're trying to figure something out, right? Your scratch. Next, you're going to have a math piece of paper. This one is going to be organized. So when I look to see what math did you do to figure out the last row in your arena, what math did you do to figure out how many seats are in your arena, what math did you do to figure out what the common ratio is, right? That I know on this piece of paper, I'm not searching for it. Who knows? Is it in the top right corner, the bottom right corner, in the middle, on the back side? I don't know where it is. In the middle of the Mickey Mouse ears? I don't know where it is. But this one is organized. And so when I look at each bullet point, I can see, okay, I know the math you did to figure out the bullet points that require math. Some of these bullet points require research. I hope you're listening to me. So some of these bullet points require research, and some require math. So we're going to go back to realize how many seats are in the first row? That was research. When we figure out how many seats are going to be in the last row, that's going to be math. How many seats are in the whole arena? That's going to be math. All right? So some are going to be research, and some are going to be math. When it involves math, you're going to organize it so I can see where the numbers came from. And then the last one is going to be the actual proposal, where you're going to use real sentences and real words to then summarize what you came up with for building your arena. And I actually put a template online so that anyone, even those that struggle writing complete sentences and be able to communicate in writing, it's like a sentence frame. If you need sentence frames, I will give you basic sentence frames so that you can come up with a basic proposal, okay, if you need it. So Do you see what three things you're going to staple together when you hand it in? Yes or no? Okay. The first bullet point was the number of seats in the first row. We talked about this on Thursday. In fact, if you have your notes from Thursday, it'd be helpful if they're there right now in front of you. Now, the symbol we use when it's a sequence, how many seats are in the first row are really going to be your A1, right, for your sequence? Do you remember what we did to figure this out? How did we figure out what's a reasonable number of seats that would make up the first row? What did we do? Did we do math or did we research and saw an NHL arena right now, right? In fact, we went to the Anaheim Ducks, I think at first with the LA Kings, and that was getting a headache. And then at the very end, because for every reason their seating chart doesn't show the exact how many seats there are, but for the Anaheim Ducks, it was easy to see how many seats there were. If you really wanted to research, you could do more than the Anaheim Ducks, right? You could do 3 or 4 or 5 arenas and get a good idea, right, how many seats make up around the arena. We also talked about it, how you could do it geometrically. You could find the circumference of the arena, figure out how wide a good seat would be, and then divide to see how many seats would fit. But I said, we're going to research it. And when we did research it, what did we find about the Ducks? How many seats make up the first row? Do you know? Those that have their notes from Thursday. Did we come up with a number? I counted how many seats were in one section, and then I multiplied it by how many sections there were. Somebody has notes from Thursday. What number did we come up with? What was it? 252. Now, that doesn't mean your arena needs 252. It means that whatever it is, it should be close to 250. So it could be 238, it could be 261, 280. I'm okay with that. But it can't be 20 or 30. It can't be 1,000. It has to be within reason of that number. So that was done not with math, but with research. How many rows? How did we figure out how many rows would be required? That's going to be your n in the formula. Do you remember what we did then? And I can see when you're not focused. I again saw a seating chart, and I literally counted, right, all the way back to the back row. In your notes from Thursday, do you remember what number we came up with? No. 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 How many rows it takes to get up to the top?
Oh, 3. There were like sections.
Was it like 23? 32. I don't remember.
All right, so I went to Ticketmaster. We're going to need this anyways for the financial part, which is what's a reasonable price for a seat in the first row. We're going to need Ticketmaster anyways to be able to see a reasonable price. And you probably don't even know how much it costs to see a hockey game. So that's okay. So we're going to go here. Remember ducks and penguins, fighting animals? 2 birds. Not known for their fighting skills, but that's okay. Ducks and penguins. All right. Shh. Stop talking like you're not focused. So, I zoomed into the seating chart. Maybe this gives a memory of what we did. Well, then you got to listen. All right. So what I did was, first of all, with the ducks at least, every gray dot represents a seat. So I can then figure out how many seats were in the first row. I then counted all the way up. I won't do it again for you. There's 42. Then if you start at the bottom and count all the way up, there's 42 rows. If you were going to research, you wouldn't just take the Ducks. You could also do the Penguins or the Kings or the Sharks or whatever NHL team you want, and you'd figure out how many rows does it take to go from the first row to the very top. Your arena has to have at least 40. Why? Because the arena that Mr. Dogs is in right now has 40. If you're going to do a new arena, it better be more than what he has right now. Because he needs to create more money. Why would you build a new arena if it's not bigger and better? So it has to be more than 40. So I need you to be able to think. You researched how many there were. Most arenas go into the 40s in terms of the base row to the very top. So from that, you need to decide how many rows will your arena be. And that's going to be somewhere between 40, it's going to be above 40, and probably less than 50. So you're going to pick a number in the 40s for your arena. Just like for your seats. How many seats make up the first row? It will likely be somewhere between 225 and like 285. Like that's reasonable. That's reasonable. How many seats make up the first row? How many rows to the very top? So the first two bullet points are done by research. The next one, the number of seats by which each row increases. We did not get to that on Thursday. The less I see you listening to me, the more I'm just going to let you do it by yourself, and then I'll grade it based on that already. But I'd rather you listen. So if I want to know the number of seats by which each row increases. So we know the first row. How many more will the next row have? And the next row, what am I going to be adding by the same amount every single time? Well, there's a restriction. And the restriction is when you add it all up, it has to be between 18,000 and 22,500. So you can't just pick whatever you want, like, oh, it's going to go up by 30 seats, because at the end, when you add up all the seats, it better be between this and that. It can't be too big, it can't be too small. So we're actually going to start here to figure out what our D is. What is the formula for an arithmetic series, if I'm going to add it up? It is n divided by 2. What's our n again? Our n is how many rows we have. You got to pick that number between 40 and 50. Inside is A1. What's A1 again? How many seats are in the first row? And then AN, which is really how many seats are in the last row. Well, the truth is, I don't know how many seats will be in the last row yet. I will. So instead, I need to know, is there a formula I can put in for AN that's arithmetic? Again, the answer is yes. What's a formula I can put in for AN? That means finding a term, right? Arithmetic term. What's the formula? Not to add it up, but just for an arithmetic term. Well, we start with D, right? Our slope. And then we take one of the points. So if we take 1, then it's A1, right? I don't know what I'm hearing, but I'd like it to be silent. Even if your phone is on, in terms of buzzing and dinging and everything else. Just be silent with it. You can keep it on. This is what I'm going to put inside my formula. So where I see a AN, instead of AN, what am I going to put in? D, n minus 1 plus A1. Now, why am I doing that substitution? Because I know what n is. I know A1. And then I only have one variable I don't know, which is D. So I'm going to do an example for you, and you can't use my numbers. So if I say that in my first row, there's going to be 250 seats. In my arena, we'll have 42 rows. That when I use this formula, instead of n, what am I going to put in? 42. A1 is 250. I don't know D. That's what I'm solving for. Like, how much is it going to increase every time? I don't know it. That's the math. N again is 42, and A1 again is 250. 50. When I put that in my calculator, I'm going to experiment and guess with different numbers for D, and the answer has to be between what and what? 18,000 and 22,500. So that when I take out my calculator, I'm going to first guess, and then when I guess wrong, I'm going to adjust. So I'm going to say, Ivan, what am I going to guess? What do you think a reasonable number increase every row until you get to the top? So the second row is going to have how many more seats? And there is not a wrong answer. 30. Perfect. So I'm going to use my calculator. You have a different calculator. This is the one you'll have when you're in calculus next year. So I'm going to type this in. By the way, some of you are in stats. It's okay to take out your stats calculator. So 42 divided by 2, 250. Now, notice I'm going with what Ivan said. So what number I'm going to put in for D is 30. And I'm going to continue. I'm going to type it all in, and I'm going to see what number I get. So what number do I get when I typed it in? Can you see it? Is that too big or too small? Why is it too big? Because it has to be between 18,000, right, and 22,500. So now I'm going to guess again. Smaller than 30, right? Abraham, give me a number that I can now try that's smaller than 30. 20. I love that. It's already typed in my calculator, right? So guess what? I'm going to just go back into my calculator, and I'm just going to change that one number. Instead of 30, I'm going to change it to 20. What number does 20 give me? Does that work? No, right? So I got to keep going. Ben, give me another number. 10. So now I'm going to try 10. So instead of 20, what happens is each row is 10 more than the one before it. Will that give me what I need for the whole arena? So let me put in 10. Now how much is it? Is that in the range that I need? Beautiful. So what happened if I put in 11 or 12? Guess what? All those numbers would likely work. 9, right? So you got to decide and experiment which number, right? But I've now answered the next bullet point. What's the next bullet point? The number of seats by which each row increases. So what's true for mine? Each row will increase by how many? So each row is going to increase by 10 seats all the way up to the top. The next bullet point is, how many seats are in the last row? Well, now I know what D equals. Remember, now we're got information. Our A1, by my example, you use a different number, is 250. How many rows make up my arena? Yours is going to be different, 42. And we just said the common difference, it's going to increase by how many seats as you go up to the top? 10. I want to know how many seats are in the last row. Well, the last row is the 42nd row. What's the formula for arithmetic for the 42nd term? What would I put in? So it's 10, n minus 1. Well, my n is, and then the first term was 250. All right, I'm going to put that in my calculator. So how many seats are in the last row? So in my arena, the last row will have how many seats? Now I've answered the fourth bullet point, right? And then the last bullet point is, how many total seats are in the whole arena? Well, didn't I already answer that with my calculator? Come back here. What was the number for how many seats are in the whole arena? 19,110. Did I now answer every bullet point? Some required research and some required math. Keep going. This is all the math, right? When there's math involved, you're going to show where the math came from for your project. Next, there's a second part. The second part had to do with pricing. So let's go to the next bullet point. We did the first 5 bullet points. There's 3 more. Do you see them? What's the next one? What does it say? Determine a reasonable price per game for each seat in the first row. What research would you do for that? You go and try to buy a ticket, right? At different hockey games. So we're going to again go back to the Ducks. I want to know a reasonable price per ticket for the first row. And this is going to lead us to the first assumption we're making. Now, in a real hockey game, you really buy a seat in the first row? Do you think that every seat in the first row would cost exactly the same amount of money? So for this project, they need to cost the same as we're building it up as a sequence. But in real life, in terms of that arena, you're going to write down, you're assuming, right? What are you assuming? That every seat costs the same. So when you do your template of your proposal, there's going to be room for assumptions that you made. One assumption you made is that every seat is worth the same in that row. That's not true, right? Just like when you made your seating chart, does an arena have a complete ring around the bottom? Or is there a space for the player's bench? A space for the Zamboni? All that. Is there a space for media where they don't even sell seats for a basketball game, right? Or you can't buy, or for the cheerleaders, or whatever it is, right? That they have on the sideline. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. So I'm going to assume, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to average what I see. So when you look at this game, can you see the colored dots? The ones that are in color are the ones that you can still buy tickets to. Can you see how much it costs? So if I wanted this one right here, right beside the home bench, how much does it cost per ticket? That's not a playoff game. That's not the Stanley Cup final. It's just a regular game. If you want to sit there, it's $700. Now, why are those 2 seats expensive? They're right beside the home bench. You know when they walk in and they throw the puck over, or you feel the sweat and you hear the sticks, and when the game's over, they throw the stick over the board that you can keep forever and remember that game? That's those 2 seats, right? And you have the sign that goes on TV that says, "I love the Ducks, quack, quack," and it gets on TV, right? The sign up against there. Now, hey, keep that in your head. So how much does that cost? $800. That's probably the most expensive seats you can get. Now, what happens if you sit behind the goalie? How much do those seats cost? Now it's only a little cheaper, right? If you sit behind the goalie. Do you see these seats up here that aren't quite behind the goalie? How much do those seats cost? So do you get an idea that they're not the same all the way around? But what would be a reasonable price would be to average in your head. You don't have to do the math behind it. But what would be a good average number for a front row seat to a hockey game? You saw $800. What else did you see? $300, right? You saw another one that was like $400 or $500. Huh? One was $700. Now, there's no wrong answer here. There's some wrong answers, but there's a lot of good answers. What would be a reasonable price for a hockey game? So, you're definitely going to pick. You're definitely going to pick a price. Oops. Let me make this the numbers on the right side. You're going to definitely pick a price somewhere between $300 and $700, right? Like the lowest we saw was $300, but the most expensive was $700. So you're going to pick, not my number, but you're going to pick. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to make mine expensive. $550. It's a new arena, has like the best of the best, the most comfortable seats, all that. $550 per game for a seat. So one of the bullet points was, what's a reasonable price per game for one seat, right? And we did some research, and then based on the research, I have a reasonable answer, right? Rather than just throwing out a number like $100 sounds right to me, right? You looked it up first, right? It was based on something, not just like, oh, I can't picture anyone spending more than $100 at a hockey game, right? Because that could be reasonable. You go, I'd pay like $20 for the front row. I wouldn't pay more than that. You know, I'd rather see da-da-da. So, yes. You want me to? Why not? Are you just interested? You want to see the game? So, right behind is actually not the first row, right? It's the second row. Now, here's another thing that we're making an assumption for because of sequence, is that it actually is geometric going up. The first row is way more expensive than the second, third, and fourth, and fifth. Like the second, third, fourth, and fifth are all kind of close in price together. The first row is way more expensive than any other row in the whole arena. So that's because when you're there, you get to pound the glass. When you're there, you have a place for your beverage. When you're there, you think you're going to be on TV. When you're there, you get to feel the hit against the glass, right? The first row is this iconic place to be in a hockey game, where you can be right there on the glass. I was at a hockey game, and I was on like the second level, like way up high, and they did a contest. You would never believe it's true though. It's on video. And they, you know when they do a contest, when they do trivia, you know, and you're like, okay, we got 3 questions, you got to answer them right, and then you like get to go in the front row. You know, those kind of games. So I was on the big video screen, me and my wife, and then she doesn't know anything about hockey. She knows she doesn't know anything about hockey. And then I was there, so she looked at me, and so they asked me 3 questions about hockey, just nailed them. 1, 2, 3, like, give me my tickets. And so I don't remember. I know, I just like, whatever.
You said it was that important. You don't remember?
Well, it was like silly. Like, it was like for California people. Like, California people don't know what the red line is, or like what the blue line is, or like what icing is, or whatever like that. So they're asking questions, like they were asking questions that someone from California wouldn't know, not like talking like a, you know, old Canadian that played hockey his whole life. So that's okay. But that was the one time where I was able to, like, you won tickets and you go down the front row. Huh? I don't have the video. Huh? Oh yeah, I played it. I didn't play like college, like to compete college, but recreational. You know, they have intramurals and stuff. I played that in college.
What was the date? What was the date on that?
What was the date? What, I mean, it wasn't that. I mean, it was before children. So before 2012. Yes. What's that? It wasn't the Boston Bruins. It was here. It was the Ontario Reign. Do you know the Ontario Reign?
On like social media?
No, I don't think so. Ontario is the minor league team for the LA Kings. And so it was like going down the ice there of the Ontario Reign. But it was still fun. Slap shots came out the glass. Yes, it's hockey. It's ice. If it wasn't cold, it would melt, right? All right, so back here. Hey, we're not done yet. I love that you're involved in thinking about it and want to be engaged about it. Hey, so the next one is, the first bullet point was, determine a reasonable price per game in the first row, right? We did that by doing what? Researching. The next one says, determine the factor by which the cost of each seat per game will decrease. So the most expensive one will be in the first row, and then the price will get cheaper, cheaper, cheaper until you get to the top. And one of the assumptions we're making is that it is a geometric sequence going all the way up to the top, and not that the first row is way more expensive than all the rows that follow it. Now I'm going to skip that bullet point, because this one is going to help me get to the middle one. The bottom one is determine the price per game of each seat in the last row. Are you with me? I'm not sure if everyone's with me. Are you with me? Yeah. So we're going to go back to Ticketmaster, but instead of looking at the first row, we're going to look at the top row. Can we do this together, please? So you're looking and listening and trying to pay attention as best you can. So I'm going to move the screen to the top.
$26.
Now, do you see that on the right? So the very top row here is $68. So here again is assumption. Listen. The assumption is that the price should be about the same all the way around at the top, which is not true. So the ones that are at center ice, like the 50-yard line for hockey at the top, are expensive because, like me included, like to be at the top middle where you can kind of see everything from the middle. Well, if you're at one end, they're not as expensive because you can't see the game as well behind one goalie at the end. And the more expensive, too, is if you actually are near the opposing goalie. So not the goalie you're cheering for, but the other guy's goalie you want to be close to. Why do you want to be close to the other guy's goalie? Because you want to see the goals, right? You want to see your goals against that other goalie, right? So the seats that are closer to the opposing goalie are cheaper than the seats close to the home goalie. Because who wants to just watch your home goalie make saves? You want to watch your team score goals, right? That's why you're there, not to see the goalie make saves. Anyway, that's another assumption. But we're making every price the same all the way to the top. So we're going to do an average of what I see. So how much was this one again? 68? Well, how about this one right here? 84, right? That's the top row. How about way over here in the corner? These are going to be cheap.
You're thinking on the little screen.
33? You actually can see something, but there's also multiple video. There's also a lot of video screens. So if you have a bad view, you can like look up if it's on the other end of the ice and you can't see. I hear you. So, and what are they over here? So now they're 30. So what's the cheapest you saw? 30, and the most expensive? 80. So let's come back here. So now I'm going to write that down. Now remember, I said that my arena has 42 rows. Yours may have something different. So, what am I listening to? Okay. Something's wrong, right? We're going to pick a price between 30 and 80. What do you think the price per game should be in the last row? We're averaging something. So I'm just going to say my last row is going to be $60 per game. You're going to pick different numbers. And why did I put down 42? Some of you need this, right? Like you know what your grade is 1 week, 1 day, right? And the more you show that you're engaged, listening, and want to do well, that helps your grade out. So, do you know why I put down 42?
This is the 42nd row.
That's right. Thank you, Aldo. All right. Now, what don't I know that the second bullet point asks for? Listening. What don't I know that the second thing is what the R is? What's the factor it's going to go up by? So I have to do math. I have to do math to find R. So I'm going to remind you about this formula that we use to find any term in a geometric sequence. A1 times R to the n minus 1. My AN is how much it cost in the last row, which we said was $60. I said was $60. My A1 is how much it costs in the first row, which is $550. My R is what I'm looking for. That's my unknown. My N is how many rows are in the arena again. And now I'm going to do math to solve for N that will tell me what factor it decreases by from the bottom row to the top row. Step 1 to solve this is to undo what's in front of the R. That means I'm going to divide both sides by 550. I'm also going to subtract in the exponent. So 42 take away 1 is 41. Next, I need to know how to solve for R. I need to know how to undo that exponent. So to undo the exponent, I do the root that goes with that exponent. So the root that goes with 41 is the 41st root. That means on the other side, I'm doing the 41st root of 60 over 550. Now, I'm going to do it on this calculator. If you don't know how to do it on your calculator, on the wall, I would help you. So I'm going to type it in. So I want you to notice what R equals for my pricing. That R equals approximately 0.947. Or you could also write it as a percent, meaning it's losing value, like 94.7% of what it was before. If it was 100%, then it would be the same cost all the way up. 94.7 means it's losing a little value every time going all the way up to the top. But now I've answered that middle dot, which says determine the factor by which the cost of each seat per game will decrease. So what's the answer? 0.947 or 94.7%. 7%. You have now done the research, you have now done the math, and the last step is to write the proposal. Online on my website, underneath the calendar, you open up sequences and series. There's a template to follow to write the proposal that has these numbers in that you've done. You put it all together, staple it, and then hand it in to me. Good luck.